Hey, this is Ron Reich, and today I am going to share with you my 2026 reading update thus far. So let's get right into it. I have a not so fancy Google Doc to share with you. This one has all of the books that I've read thus far this year. So I've only read 19 books, and some of these are small books. So how many weeks have there been in the year? Let's do a quick count. We've had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24. We're on week 25 of the year. And I've read 19 books. So the goal is to do one book per week. So I'm actually not that far behind on that. And to be fair, I do include audiobooks here as well. Oftentimes it'll be part, I'm actually reading it, the other part audio. Anyways, just want to give you a quick overview. I'll go through these quickly, let you know my quick thoughts on them, and then I'll highlight the ones that were really awesome that you may want to check out. So earlier this year, I went through a little phase where I was really into the history of Disneyland and some of these 90s entertainment power players. So this book, The Men Who Would Be King, this is a history of DreamWorks. Very good book. It's actually a really good book. A lot of good business lessons in there. Really interesting to see how this is a fun, entertaining book. A lot of celebrities. This is, of course, DreamWorks, founded by Steven Spielberg, David Geffen, and Jeffrey Katzenberg. The whole story is super, super interesting. It's really interesting to see how like smart people do dumb things and how there are some things that back in the 90s that they did that they thought was like really innovative. And in hindsight, it's like, oh, that was not such a good idea. So that was a okay book. No, it was a really good book. I would recommend it. But this book, Disney War, this is a true S tier corporate book. This book is amazing. I actually reread this book. I had read it when it came out in the early 2000s. This is about it's about what happened when Disney basically about when Michael Eisner got ousted as Disney's CEO back in the early 2000s, and just all sorts of great cutthroat politics, corporate politics, a lot of good entertainment nuggets in there as well. Fun fact, the my all-time favorite show, Succession, the creator of Succession, Jesse Armstrong, he actually mentions this book as one of his influences for Succession. So that was pretty cool. So check out this book if you're looking for something fun to read that also has some good lessons on business power and things like that. Every day is Sunday. I went through a little bit of a football phase earlier, or I actually mostly late last year, but I was still in. No, this was actually, I take it back. This was during the kind of peak football season. This would have been during January. So this is when I was very locked into the NFL. I'm a huge Chicago Bear fan. And so there were some good books that came out around that time. This book, Every Day is Sundays, it's essentially a history, not so much a history of the NFL, but it's about how the NFL became so big and popular. So it's cool. There's some good, that was an easy, entertaining book to read. I think I read it in just a couple days. It was cool. Football. This is a recent book that came out by Chuck Klosterman. Chuck Klosterman, the famous kind of pop cultural essayist. He's got his own style. He's really smart. it's okay. It was okay. It was okay. I wouldn't say it was the best book ever, but there was like it's kind of hit and miss. There's some kind of fun chapters in there. Other times he just gets really deep into stuff and it's just like not that cool. This book, Resume, total game changer. This book is probably one of the I'm actually not exaggerating this. Probably one of the top five most impactful personal development books I've ever read. This book was written by Susan Pierce Thompson, the creator of Bright Line Eating, which I've been following for quite a while. This was her follow-up to that book, which basically is about what happens when you get off your diet and how you resume it. And she really comes from it from like this idea that some people are addicted to sugar, like similar to like alcoholics, and you really have to take it that seriously if you really want to be healthy and not not relapse essentially into binge eating, which I've had problems with for pretty much my entire life. And I heard her talk about this idea in the past, but um it really landed with this book. And she gives some very specific tools. And again, this was a total game changer. And I'm proud to say I've been sober from binge eating sugar flour for over 4 months now, which is actually the longest I've ever gone doing that. So, and this book is was really the starting point. Bigger picture, not just when it comes to food, but realizing that this is one of my biggest insights of this year is that we have addictions. If you, for me personally, now there's people that might disagree with this, but for me personally, I think for a lot of people, I think if you really accept the fact that you have addictions and you need to treat your addictions like you're an alcoholic with like with just 100% abstinence, that can actually be a total game changer. So, for example, the more I accept that I have a serious addiction when it comes to sugar, flour, binge eating, that really helpful. Also, when I realize that I'm addicted to technology, and I mean, I don't use it as much, but I realize that that addiction is there, that I'm like addicted to YouTube, that if I go down the rabbit hole, I can't stop. The more I realize that, the more I have agency to control it. So this book, total game changer. Highly, highly recommended. After Disney, this is, as you can see, I was going through a little bit of a Disney phase. This book was about what happens after Walt Disney died and the his son-in-law took over. So it basically talks about essentially it's the period before Michael Eisner. Disney War starts when Michael Eisner takes over Disneyland and the Disney Empire. And this book is that in between period between Walt Disney and Michael Eisner. It's okay. It's good. There's some interesting things in there. And this is kind of like this was when Disney was not really doing a lot of stuff. This was I think there was even talk about them selling the company, closing down the parks. This was during I think basically mostly during the 70s. If you might recall, there wasn't many big hit movies of Disney in the 70s. So kind of interesting. Ken and Abel, this is a cool book. This is written by Jeffrey Archer, who is apparently one of the most like top selling novelists of all time. This is one of his most famous books. It's pretty cool. It basically talks about it's about these two. One of them is an immigrant, which I believe is Abel. The other one, Kane, grew up in the U.S. and it's basically kind of from a rich. He's like the rich one from a rich family. Abel's the immigrant, and they kind of like cross paths, and they both become these two like big corporate titans, and they have this rivalry. So it's a pretty cool book. It's a good, fun to read. Fun read. Power of Intention, classic Wayne Dyer book. There's some good nuggets in there. Bonfire of the Murdochs. hopefully you can see kind of like some of the stuff that I'm into. Bonfire of the Murdochs. This is a recent book that came out about the Murdoch family and their recent turmoil. This is the real life Succession story, which you might know the movie. I'm sorry, this show Succession is actually heavily based on the Murdoch family, and this is kind of like yeah, there's a lot of there's some good stuff in there. The thing about this book is that most of the stuff I've been following and kind of reading about the Murdoch family for quite a while. So most of this is stuff I'd known, I'd heard before. There's also a recent documentary that came out on Netflix, which I believe came out prior to this book. So some of it was kind of rehashing that. But yeah, it was okay. Escape. This was a fun book written by a guy who was a former contestant on Survivor, and it's a fiction, so it's a novel about kind of a survivor adjacent type experience. And it was okay. I didn't like the ending that much. It was kind of interesting, but nothing. I would not highly recommend it, to be honest. Science of Scaling, excellent book. There's a chance if you're watching this, you've heard of that book. I'll just highlight the ones that I would you might want to consider checking out. And any non, so I actually would, I think I would definitely recommend checking out Disney War. Okay, so Science of Scaling, excellent book by Ben Hardy, where he basically gives you his framework for accomplishing impossible goals. Really one of the better kind of personal development slash business books I've read. It's probably, you know, somewhere in the top, somewhere in the top 10, top 20. Check that book out. He gives you you can get the audiobook for free on his website. It's worth checking out. And of course, these days, the robots love Ben Hardy, so you can get summaries of it just by asking your favorite AI app. Burn Book by Kara Swisher, I believe is her name. She's a famous kind of Silicon Valley reporter, and and she gives she gives a lot of it's kind of a there's a lot of gossip. She talks about she has encounters with Elon Musk, Steve Jobs, like all the big players. Each chapter is essentially about one of the personalities. So if you're into Silicon Valley gossip, um, that's a cool book. This Monster Lives, excellent book. This is one that's more of a very unique to my specific interests. This book is a book, it's the most meta book of all time because back in whatever year that was, 2003, I believe, there's an excellent documentary about Metallica called Some Kind of Monster, which is an excellent groundbreaking documentary that really goes deep into the band. Maybe I'll do another video where I talk about that documentary a little bit more. And this book, the meta is, and that book was about the making of one of their albums. So there's a movie, a documentary about the making of one of their albums. And this book, This Monster Lives, was written by one of the filmmakers about the making of the movie. So it's a book about the making of a movie, which was about the making of an album. And it's one of my favorite movies. I love Metallica. I've seen the movie like dozens of times. So, getting to some of the different insights from this, I thought it was super cool. And this is actually the thing that kind of got me reignited into listening to a lot more heavy metal and going to concerts and stuff like that. So check that one out, or probably don't check that one out unless you're a big Metallica fan. That's a pretty deep cut, as we say. Um, this one, The Emergency Survival Guide for the AI Revolution, was written by my guy Dan Kennedy. It's a recent book, just came out a couple months ago, and it gives his take on AI and what's going on, how to AI proof your business. And Dan Kennedy, he has seen it all. He is the number one business mind of all time, in my estimation. And it's definitely worth checking out his insights. And this is a short book. You can read it in just a couple days. I think it's only like maybe 100 pages or so. So definitely check this book out. Maintain. This is the a recent Susan Pierce Thompson book, who also the person who wrote Bright Line Eating. And it's basically about once you get to a good weight, how do you maintain it? So there's a lot of good things in there. I would recommend you, if you're resonating with any of that, what I talked about when it comes to resume and sugar addiction, and you're not familiar with Susan Pierce Thompson stuff, I would definitely recommend reading her books in order. Read Bright Line Eating first, then check out Resume, and then later on check out Maintain. Another one, the Dopamine Nation Workbook. This is based on the book Dopamine Nation. I actually did not read that book. Oops. I did not read that book. I read a summary of it and I was like, oh, this is cool. And there's a workbook. So I highly recommend the workbook. It's basically about how to get rid of our different addictions, like basically our different dopamine addictions. And the thing that was interesting from the book is that I realized that I have a lot of like dopamine loops that are things that might even be considered good. Like, for example, I'll spend too much time thinking about my next book to read and creating like future book pipelines. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but that isn't really a good thing either because it's like you're getting a fix from like not doing anything, if that makes sense. So this book kind of gave a lot of nuances and a lot of things. I have quite a few dopamine elimination projects that I'm planning on doing, which is I know ironic as I'm saying that. Um, so that's a thing as well. So this book is really good, really, really, really good book. The gal who wrote it is an MD who knows lots of things, and she really gives some really great frameworks for actually kind of deciding what addictions to focus on. And she gives different, basically, she recommends doing these 30-day projects. So this is like right up my alley. Really good book. Emperor Soul, I'm I'm working on getting back into my fantasy reading. It's a little bit sad that I've only read one fantasy book this year, and this was the first one. Emperor Soul, a book written by Brandon Sanderson, who is the most famous Brandon fantasy author these days. I'll talk about him more in future videos. And this was a highly recommended book of his, and it's one of his, he's written a lot of books, but it's one of his most well-known, best received standalone books. And it was cool. I know there are people who like love this book and say it's like amazing, like one of his best books. I thought it was good. It was cool, but it wasn't like blowing my mind. So Death Punched. This was a very easy, fun book to read, which I just finished a couple of days ago. This book was written by a guy by the name of Jeremy Spencer, who was the drummer for the band Five Finger Death Punch. I mentioned that I've recently got back into heavy metal music, and I pretty much, up until recently, I pretty much stopped getting into new bands up until like the late 90s. And there's all these like post 2000 heavy metal bands that are, some of them are really good and some of them are really well known and influential. Because I mean, bands that came out like in the early 2000s, they're 20 years old by now. They're by now considered classic bands. And one of those bands is a band called Five Finger Death Punch, which I just recently found out about. I'm I think they're quite awesome. So I was looking for it, see if there's any books about them, and this is the one that came up. It was written by the drummer who, this was is really an addiction book. Most of the book is about his struggles with addiction, but of course there is like band stuff that's going on in there. So yeah, so just a really easy, fun read. It really sucks you in. It's hard to put down. Highly recommended. This book, Flipping the Switch, I just finished this. This is me kind of like, I don't know if cheating is the right word. This is a very short book. I think it only took like an hour to read. A part of me shouldn't even, well, it's a book, so I'm going to put it on the list. That this kind of helps my numbers. Um, so this book is a short history of the band. Another post 2000 metal band called Kill Switch Engage, who I'm seeing in concert later on this week. Very excited about. So I just read this book to get a history of them. I wasn't really familiar with them up until recently, and this book is a history of the band, talks about their albums, and that's basically it. Um, I would be very shocked if you end up reading this book after watching this video. And I will just say it was cool to get a history of the book. But one thing I will say is that uh, the guy who wrote this book, he is a super fan of this band. And you would think that if you're reading, you would think that if you're reading that when as I'm reading this book, you would think that you're reading about like the Beatles. You're thinking about like the creation of the White Album or Sergeant Pepper when it comes to just how he describes. It's like, okay, dude, these guys are really good, but just chill out. So let's see if there's any. I would say I'm tempted to. I actually will put Dopamine Nation here. Okay, so I would. Okay, so I will. The way I will do this is, I think all of these books are worth reading. But you listening to this, if you're looking to improve, optimize yourself and grow your coaching business, by far the best book to read would be The Science of Scaling. I think that one is an important book to read. Everyone should read that book. I highly recommend you check out Dan Kennedy's book. And then for me personally, the most impactful book was actually Resume. Again, if you're not familiar with the Bright Line Eating concepts, read Bright Line Eating first. And I really think Dopamine Nation, I think this, and you can just go to the work, but I really recommend you check out this book. So if I were to give you a recommendation on which of these books you should read, I think these are the three you should read. And I would actually put them in, I would say read Science of Scaling, read Dopamine Nation Workbook, and then read Emergency Survival Guide for the AI Revolution. All right, that is my book update. I'll probably do another book update probably in a few months. Maybe I'll plan on doing these like quarterly. So probably September. Hopefully I'll be ahead on the rhythm there. But there you go. That is my book update for 2026. Looking forward to sharing more. Let me know about what was your most impactful book you read so far this year. Mine was Resume by Susan Pierce Thompson, but I'd love to hear what yours is. All right. I'll talk to you soon. See ya.